Let's move on to the third P, which is place, and we'll talk about marketing channels. And the word channel is, you think about sort of a river channel or something that is allowing something to move, and it's the same thing as in marketing, where we have a channel where the product moves from the manufacturer through perhaps a wholesaler, distributor, retailer to the final consumer. The whole idea is that there is a channel, something that is helping the product move from the manufacturer to the final consumer. So what we're going to talk about is a little bit about why companies use distribution channels, some of the functions that channel members perform, how they interact, some different sort of alternatives to, or channel alternatives, and finally we'll talk a little bit about the idea of logistics. So why use a channel? On the right-hand side you'll see sort of what would happen if manufacturers dealt directly with consumers, that you get all sorts of multiple transactions happening. And if you have a wholesaler or a distributor in the middle, they're able to sort of consolidate particularly products from a number of different manufacturers and offer them conveniently to consumers. So if you think about a golf shop, I mean, if you were a golfer and you wanted to buy clubs, you could go to you'd have to make a trip without the golf shop to a manufacturer of golf clubs and to someone who manufactures golf balls and someone who manufactures shoes and someone who manufactures shirts. But you've got sort of a way of wholesalers bringing that assortment together and then giving it to a retailer who then can offer that wide assortment to you in a one-stop shopping. The other sort of key aspect is that manufacturers want to sell in large quantities. So a manufacturer might want to sell golf balls, minimum 1,000 golf balls at a time, where you may only want to buy 3 golf balls at a time. So you need someone or some sort of intermediary to break down that bulk and to provide the quantities that the consumers want. So why use intermediaries? Well, they provide contacts, experience, specialization. For some manufacturers, they may be selling products right across the country, and they don't want to have the expense of having someone operating in that company or in that part of the country that they employ. So they use a wholesaler or distributor in that area that specializes and provides them with contacts. It becomes much efficient to give them a percentage of the markup than to try to have their own sales force there. Provides place, time, possession, utility. Again, a manufacturer in the East Coast trying to sell a product or they want a consumer in the West Coast to buy it, well, they need some sort of retailer and wholesaler in there to be able to provide them with that product on the West Coast. So these sort of intermediaries provide all sorts of different functions. They provide information to the manufacturer. They will work on the manufacturer's behalf to promote the product. They will provide contacts for the manufacturer. They'll sort of match up what the consumer wants with what the manufacturer wants. The intermediaries are involved in developing negotiations, the physical movement of the product, also in financing. The wholesaler retailer may buy the product from the manufacturer and turn around and sell it to the retailer, so they provide cash back to the manufacturer, and they also take some risk in that they will sometimes own the product and transport it, and they'll take that responsibility on. So all sorts of different functions performed. Now with consumer marketing channels, there are sort of different types of channels. It could be a direct channel between the manufacturer and the consumer. It could involve a retailer or a wholesaler or something called a jobber, which we'll talk about in a later lecture. There's all sorts of different levels and different types of channels, and it depends on the industry and the type of product that's moving. Now, when we have these types of channels, we have opportunities for conflict, where different the distribution channel may have different goals or different strategies, or they want to do things in a very different way. And so there's all sorts of opportunities for these different organizations to not work together. And so one of the types of conflict is called horizontal conflict, where we have conflict happening at the same level of the distribution channel. So here we've got 2 retailers. Maybe one retailer has decided to deep discount a particular product and the other retailer has decided not to, and so everybody's buying the product from the deep discounter and the two retailers are fighting, and there's conflict. They're not working together to try to, or not necessarily working together, but they're working really against each other with this particular product, and they're getting upset with each other, and they may be calling the manufacturer and saying, I don't want you to sell product to that retailer, and you get into that sort of problem. You can also have vertical conflict between firms on different levels. So maybe a wholesaler and the retailer are not working together. They're at odds in terms of pricing or in terms of promoting the product. They're not sort of working in a cohesive factor. Perhaps the retailer wants the wholesaler to stock more inventory, and the wholesaler wants the retailer to take more inventory, so they don't have to carry as much stock. So you get those types of conflicts. Another term is called disintermediation, and this is where a level of the distribution channel is replaced, and it's usually due to something like the internet. The example here where the manufacturer is selling directly to the consumer, that's known as a direct channel, and perhaps by cutting the retailer out because they're selling through the internet. And that can create some sort of conflict in that the retailer might be upset, or they might be upset that the product is being available directly to consumers, especially if the prices are, if you can buy products less online from the manufacturer than you can from the retailer. And so a lot of manufacturers have set policies that no matter where you buy the product, from a manufacturer online or from the retailer in the store, that the prices will be the same. But disintermediation is when you actually cut out one level of the distribution channel, primarily due to the internet. In terms of the business market, in terms of business to business selling these types of products, the distribution channels can be the same, can have the same level of complexity. We still have wholesalers and distributors. We have other types of wholesalers, and we'll talk about those in the next lecture. We have sales agents and sales branches and industrial distributors. The point is that there are multi-levels of distribution channels, and the channels can really change depending on the industry and the product. Now, conventional distribution systems or channels, this is where each one of the members works independently, and that's where you have the problems of conflict, and that they may have different goals. It's not always the case, but sometimes it's the case. And so companies and channels have developed what are called vertical marketing systems, where there's a way of coordination between certain levels of the channel. Sometimes the channel may have a common ownership. In other words, you may have a company like some of the tire manufacturers, where they in fact own the wholesalers and they own the retail establishments as well. And so the whole channel is owned by one organization, and that really minimizes conflict. Other times, the channel is administered by a really sort of powerful channel partner. So the examples here are Walmart. Walmart is so powerful that it can kind of dictate what will happen and who will do what in the distribution channel. And the same thing within the pharmacy or the drugstore channel, where Procter & Gamble is such a very large player that they can sort of dictate what everybody will do in that distribution channel. So those are examples of vertical marketing systems where there is some sort of degree of control or coordination between channel partners. Another example is a franchise system. This is where there is a legal association between two members of the channel partner, and they sort of and the franchisee agrees to do things that the franchisor has specified, and again, so therefore there's coordination within the distribution channel. Horizontal marketing systems are where sort of two or more companies at the same level join together. So examples may be the airline alliances like Star Alliance, Air Canada, and several different airlines have agreed to sort of work together on a horizontal channel to try to move passengers from, say, one airline to another airline as people move around the world. So it's kind of a coordinated fashion, but it's at the horizontal level.